Jeremiah Johnson is one of those movies that feels bigger the more you sit with it. At first, it looks like a simple Western about a man trying to live alone in the mountains. But there is much more beneath the surface. The film placed Robert Redford in a cold, brutal world and turned his story into a survival tale that still feels powerful today. Released in 1972, Jeremiah Johnson became more than just another Western. It stood out for its realism, quiet emotion, and the mystery that still surrounds parts of its making. People still wonder what changed, what was left out, and why the film feels so different from others of its time. Join us as we take a look at Jeremiah Johnson from the very start and uncover things you may not know, the real man behind Jeremiah Johnson. Before Jeremiah Johnson became a 1972 film, the story was already wrapped in legend. The movie was based in part on two different books about a mountain man linked to the real figure John Jeremiah Garrison Johnston. In many retellings, he became known as Liver-Eating Johnson, which is the kind of name that instantly tells you this was not a gentle frontier tale. Of course, a lot of people from the Old West were turned into larger-than-life legends, and their stories were often mixed with rumor, fear, and exaggeration. Still, even with that in mind, this man's reputation stood out. The version most people remember from the film is much cleaner and more controlled than the darker stories tied to the real name. That is part of what makes Jeremiah Johnson so interesting to talk about. It is not just a Western about a man in the mountains. It is a movie built from pieces of a much rougher legend. The real figure behind it was said to be violent, wild, and driven by grief in ways the film only partly touched. So right from the start, there is a gap between the man on screen and the man people talked about in history and frontier lore. That gap matters because it helps explain why the movie feels both real and carefully shaped at the same time. And once you know the story began with a figure called Liver-Eating Johnson, you already know there is a lot more under the surface than the title Jeremiah Johnson first suggests. The man before the legend. The man tied to the legend was said to have been born John Jeremiah Garrison on July 1, 1824, in New Jersey, though old record-keeping was far from perfect, so even the details of his early life are a little shaky. At some point, he served aboard a fighting ship during the Mexican-American War. Then came the turning point that changed his path. According to the story, he struck a superior officer, which was the kind of move that could destroy a man's future in the military. Instead of staying and facing punishment, he deserted. After that, he changed his name. First, he became John Johnston, and then, somewhere along the way, the last letter fell away, and he became Johnson. The film gave people the name Jeremiah Johnson, and yes, that has a stronger ring to it, but the real man does not seem to have used that exact name. After leaving military life behind, he headed west, where he hoped to survive as a trapper and hunter. He was not ready for that life yet, so he needed someone to teach him. That was where old John Hatcher entered the story. Hatcher was a well-known mountain man who took Johnson under his wing and brought him to a cabin near the Little Snake River in northern Colorado. There, Johnson learned the skills he would need to survive: how to hunt, how to shoot a Hawken rifle, how to start a fire, how to set traps, and how to live off the land. He also learned how to trade furs for supplies and how to avoid dangers in the wild. In other words, before the legend took shape, there was a learning period, and Johnson seemed to pick it up fast. But the part that truly changed everything had not happened yet, the tragedy that changed everything. After Hatcher retired and left him the cabin, Johnson's life was said to take another major turn. He had gotten to know members of the Flathead tribe, and one chief offered his daughter in exchange for furs. Johnson later returned, and the two were married. Back at the cabin, they began building a life together. He prepared food and supplies for her because he planned to leave during the winter for trapping, and before he went, he taught her how to use his rifle. In return, she taught him to speak Salish. She also became pregnant, though he did not know that at the time. When Johnson returned in the spring, he found the cabin open and his wife dead. Her remains had been left exposed through the winter. He also discovered a small skull beneath her ribcage, which made him realize she had been carrying their unborn child when she was killed. According to the legend, this was the moment that broke him and set off one of the most brutal revenge stories in Old West lore. people began finding the bodies of Crow warriors. The bodies had been scalped and their livers had been cut out. That is how the name Liver-Eating Johnson took hold. Stories grew even darker from there. He was said to have hunted Crow men for years, possibly killing hundreds, though those numbers belong more to legend than clear proof. One story claims the Crows sent their strongest men after him and none came back. Another says he was captured by Blackfoot warriors, escaped after breaking free from leather straps, scalped a guard, cut off the man's leg, and later ate it to stay alive during a winter journey back to safety. Whether every detail was true or not, the point is clear. The legend was built on grief, revenge, fear, and shocking violence. And that is exactly the kind of material a film would never present in full. When the legend became a movie, years later, Hollywood found its way to that story. In April 1968, producer Sidney Beckerman got the film rights to Crow Killer, the saga of Liver-Eating Johnson. By May 1970, Warner Brothers had the rights and hired John Milius to write a screen version. The movie was shaped from both Crow Killer and Vardis Fisher's novel Mountain Man. Milius first wrote what would become Jeremiah Johnson for a small fee, but he kept being brought back to work on it again and again. And in the end, he made much more from the project because the studio kept needing him. He later said Edward Anhalt and David Rayfield also worked on the screenplay, but that he kept returning because no one else could quite handle the dialogue the way he could. He said his feel for the language came from writers like Carl Sandburg, and he was also influenced by True Grit. Even at this stage, the movie was not trying to tell the real Johnson story in a straight way. It was already becoming a crafted version of that legend. That matters because the film was being built as something more thoughtful and more controlled than the rough story that inspired it. In many ways, it offered the image of a tired man escaping society, finding peace in nature, losing that peace, and then being pulled back into violence. For audiences in that era, especially during the Vietnam War years, that kind of story had a strong pull. It looked like a Western, but it also worked as a survival story and a quiet character study. And once the writing was taking shape, the next big question became who would actually play this mountain man on screen. Before Robert Redford got the role. Robert Redford is the face most people connect with Jeremiah Johnson now, but he was not the first name linked to the role. The part was first meant for Lee Marvin, and then Clint Eastwood became a serious possibility, with Sam Peckinpah set to direct. That version never happened. Peckinpah and Eastwood did not get along, so Peckinpah left, and Eastwood moved on and chose to make Dirty Harry instead. Another account says Eastwood looked at the role and felt the character was too quiet and too inward for him. He wanted more action, more movement, and more dialogue, while this mountain man was meant to carry a lot of his story in silence. However you put it, Eastwood passed, and that changed everything. Warner Brothers then lined the project up for Redford. He and Sidney Pollack had already worked together before, and Pollack was looking for another film to do with him after this property is condemned. Redford was asked if he wanted to disappear into a role where people would barely recognize him, and he agreed. He committed himself to becoming the character physically by growing out his beard and changing his appearance so he would blend into this hard frontier world. Sidney Pollack directed the film, and Redford starred as Jeremiah Johnson, with Will Geer playing Bear Claw Chris Lapp. The casting of Jeremiah's wife Swan also took time. Della Bolton ended up getting the part after standing out during auditions and interviews, even after being seen for another role first. So, by the time cameras rolled, the film had already gone through major changes. Different stars, different creative paths, and a legend that had been softened and reshaped were all part of its journey. Then the movie itself took that rough material and turned it into something very different. The story the film chose to tell. In the finished film, Jeremiah Johnson is a Mexican war veteran who heads into the Rocky Mountains and decides to live as a trapper. His first winter is hard, and he has to learn how to survive in a world that does not care whether he makes it or not. That is when he meets the older mountain man, Chris Lapp, known as Bear Claw, who helps teach him what he needs to know. As Jeremiah slowly learns the ways of mountain life, he has several encounters with native people, including the Crow. He later comes across a cabin destroyed by violence, where only a grief-stricken woman and her silent son remain alive. The woman forces the boy on him, and Jeremiah ends up taking the child with him and calling him Caleb. Not long after that, he reconnects with another mountain man, Del Gue, and the two recover Gue's stolen goods from a Blackfoot camp. Jeremiah does not like pointless killing, and that matters because it shows the film's version of him is not built as a bloodthirsty legend. Later, he and Caleb are welcomed by Christianized Flatheads, and because of the tribe's custom, Jeremiah is given the chief's daughter, Swan, as his bride. From there, the film settles into a quieter rhythm. Jeremiah, Swan, and Caleb make a home together in the wilderness, and for a while, it seems like he has found the life he wanted. This is one of the biggest differences between the film and the harsh legend that came before it. The movie does not begin with a monster. It begins with a man trying to live apart from the world. That softer approach is a big reason the story works emotionally, but the peace does not last, and once it breaks, the film turns darker in a way that echoes the old tale without fully becoming it. Loss, revenge, and a quiet ending. Jeremiah's life changes when a U.S. Army rescue party arrives and pushes him into helping guide them through the mountains. He warns them not to cross a sacred Crow burial ground, but Lieutenant Mulvey ignores that warning and takes the party through it anyway. On the way back, Jeremiah notices Swan's blue trinkets hanging there, and he rushes home to find that Swan and Caleb have been killed. That loss drives the next part of the film. Jeremiah goes after the warriors responsible and kills all but one of them, a heavy man who sings his death song when he realizes he cannot get away. Jeremiah leaves him alive, and that choice spreads the story of what he has done. Soon, he is trapped in a running fight with the Crow, who send warriors after him one by one. He survives each encounter, and his name grows into legend. But even here, the film keeps a different tone from the brutal stories tied to liver-eating Johnson. Jeremiah later crosses paths with Del Gue again and returns to places from earlier in the story, only to see how much time and pain have changed everything. The Crow even built a monument to his bravery, leaving behind small offerings. In one of the film's most powerful moments, Jeremiah meets Bear Claw again. Lap can see what all that fighting has done to him and says he has come far. Jeremiah answers, feels like far. Then Bear Claw asks, were it worth the trouble? And Jeremiah replies, what trouble? That exchange says a lot with very little. Near the end, Jeremiah has a silent meeting with Paints His Shirt Red. He starts to reach for his rifle, but the Crow Chief lifts an open hand in peace, and Jeremiah returns the gesture. It is a quiet ending for a story built from a much uglier legend. And maybe that is why the film still stands out. Because even though it came from a savage tale, it chose reflection over shock and left some of its darkest possibilities outside the frame. But the story on screen was only part of what made Jeremiah Johnson so memorable, because what happened behind the camera was almost as punishing as anything shown in the film. A Western built through real hardship. Jeremiah Johnson may look quiet and calm on screen, but the making of the film was the complete opposite. This was not the kind of production where people showed up, filmed in comfort, and went home at the end of the day feeling fine. The shoot was harsh, dangerous, and physically draining. It was the kind of production that pushed people to their limits. The crew nearly did not make it through. Robert Redford almost quit. The studio wanted changes. And behind the film itself was the even darker real-life figure who inspired it, a man whose story was far more brutal than what the movie was willing to show. Even the music connected to the film nearly got thrown out. So from the very beginning, this was never just another Western. It was a film shaped by pressure, cold, risk, and constant disagreement over what it should be. That helps explain why the finished movie feels so raw and so different. It was not only telling a survival story. In many ways, the people making it were a living one too. A big reason for that came from Redford himself. He did not step into Jeremiah Johnson casually, and he did not treat it like just another role. Before filming even started, he trained hard because he wanted the character to feel real in every small movement. He worked with a real mountain man consultant and learned practical survival skills, including skinning animals, building fires without matches, setting traps, and tracking animals through snow. He also refused to rely on a stunt double in many scenes. That meant when the film shows Jeremiah dragging a deer through the woods, standing in freezing water, or walking through snow that reached high up his legs, it was really Redford doing it. He wanted the body language to be believable. He wanted the way he walked, moved his hands, and carried himself to look like a man who had actually spent years alone in the wilderness. By the time production began, he had already lost 15 pounds. His face looked more hollow. His hands were calloused and scarred. People on set said that change did not stop when the cameras were off. He became quieter away from filming too. He would walk off by himself and sit silently by the fire. He stopped seeming like an actor pretending to be Jeremiah Johnson and started seeming like someone who had gone inward and fully settled into the life of the character. That kind of commitment gave the performance its power, but it also meant that once the conditions got even harder, Redford was not standing outside the experience. He was right in the middle of it, carrying the same strain the film itself was built on. How the shoot turned brutal. Warner Brothers had first wanted the movie shot on the studio backlot because of money, but Redford and Sidney Pollack pushed for real locations in Utah and convinced the studio they could do it for the same cost. To prepare, art director Ted Howarth drove more than 26,000 miles looking for the right places. In the end, the film was shot across nearly 100 locations in Utah, including Mount Timpanogos, Ashley National Forest, Snow Canyon State Park, Sundance Resort, Winta National Forest, Wasatch Cache National Forest, and Zion National Park. That choice gave the movie its stunning look, but it also made production brutally hard. The film was shot high in the Wasatch Mountains, around 8,000 feet above sea level, in remote areas with no roads, no trailers, and almost no comfort. The crew had to carry cameras, lights, costumes, and even food by hand. Some days they were filming 12 miles from the nearest vehicle. If someone got hurt, getting that person out could take around 2 hours just from physically carrying them. At night, even in summer, the temperature dropped below freezing. Cast and crew slept in tents, gathered around fires, and often woke up with frost on their sleeping bags. Pollack later said the snow in southern Utah was terrible and the production stayed under control only because he and Redford kept it tight. Pollack even mortgaged his own home to help support the limited budget. Because of the weather and the cost, they often could not afford second takes. Every day mattered, every setup mattered, and all of that pressure was about to show up right on the screen. The cold, the pain, and the danger on camera. Some of the film's most memorable moments came straight out of real suffering. The famous image of Jeremiah riding through a snowstorm with his beard frozen solid was not created with fake effects. Makeup tried false frost first, but it did not look believable. So Pollack told Redford to go out into a real Utah blizzard and wait until his beard froze naturally. He did exactly that. He sat on horseback in wind and sub-zero cold without heaters until ice formed on his eyebrows, mustache, and beard. His face went numb. His hands stiffened around the reins. The crew had to work fast because the cold was hurting the equipment too. Redford later said that was the moment he truly understood the character, because the story was not about beating the mountains, but becoming part of them. On another rough day, he filmed a scene in waist-deep snow and insisted on doing it himself again and again until it looked right. The cold soaked through his clothes, and the exhaustion was real. Then there was the pain he kept hidden. During a fight scene with Blackfoot warriors, he took an elbow to the chest, felt or heard something crack, and kept going. He had broken 2 ribs. He told no one for 3 weeks because the production was already behind schedule and over budget, and he did not want to create another problem. Every morning he wrapped his torso, took painkillers between takes, and kept filming. A doctor later could not believe he had been doing physical scenes in that condition. But Redford's attitude was simple. Jeremiah Johnson would not stop for broken ribs, so he would not either. Still, even broken ribs were not the only danger waiting in those mountains. The moments that felt real, because they were. Part of what makes Jeremiah Johnson feel so alive is that some of its best moments were shaped by real reactions and real people. The scene where Jeremiah returns home and finds his family murdered was filmed in one take with almost no preparation. Pollock simply told Redford to walk in, see what was there, and react. Redford did not know exactly how the cabin would look. When he saw the staged aftermath, his response was immediate and raw. The crew just kept filming. When it was over, Redford walked away and sat alone in the woods for 2 hours without speaking. Pollock believed that what ended up on screen did not feel acted. It felt real. The scenes with Bear Claw Chris Lapp carried that same kind of truth in a different way. Will Geer, who played Bear Claw, was not only acting like an outdoorsman. He was said to be one in real life and had lived off the land during the Hollywood blacklist years. In the survival scenes where Bear Claw teaches Jeremiah how to live in the wilderness, much of the dialogue was not delivered exactly as written. Geer added real trapping tips, survival advice, and frontier-style wisdom, and Pollock loved it. He told the cameras to keep rolling so Redford could answer naturally. That is why those scenes feel relaxed and lived in. Geer also did his own stunts, even though he was already in his 70s. He climbed rocks, stood in icy streams, and skinned a rabbit on camera himself. After filming ended, he stayed in the mountains 3 more days alone, camping and hunting, because to him it felt like home. Even one of the movie's most famous lines came out of that same spirit. During a night shoot around a campfire, the written line felt too flat, so Redford asked to try something else. He sat quietly, looked into the fire, and came up with, "I, Jeremiah Johnson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby sell my soul to the devil." He said it in one take. The set went silent. Pollock knew right away it had to stay. But not every scene that was shot was lucky enough to survive. The scene producers removed. One of the most surprising things about Jeremiah Johnson is that one of its deleted storylines had already been fully filmed before it was cut. In that version, Jeremiah came across U.S. cavalry soldiers who were hunting Native Americans, and they tried to recruit him as a scout. He refused, and the story started moving toward a confrontation. This was not some loose idea that never made it past the planning stage. It was a real sequence that lasted around 8 minutes, which meant time, money, and work had already gone into it. But when it was shown in test screenings, something felt off. The issue was not that the scene was unclear. The issue was that it pulled the film away from Jeremiah's personal emotional journey. Instead of staying close to his grief, his loneliness, and the hard life he was trying to survive, the movie started to feel broader and more openly political. Pollock did not want that. He believed the film worked best when it stayed intimate and focused on Jeremiah's inner change rather than turning into a larger frontier conflict story. The studio was angry because money had already been spent on costumes, extras, and action, but Pollock chose to cut the whole thing. That choice says a lot about how he saw the film. Even the final shot led to debate. Warner Brothers wanted a more traditional Western ending, something cleaner and more closed, maybe Jeremiah riding off or returning to civilization. Pollock wanted the silent hand gesture across the snowy valley. He saw it as peace not through victory, but through shared suffering. Test reactions were mixed, but Pollock noticed something important. The people who liked that ending kept thinking about it, while the people who disliked it forgot it quickly. So he kept it. And that same instinct shaped both the ending audiences remember and the scene they never got to see. And once those choices were locked in, the film moved into the next part of its story. How it sounded, how it was received, and how its legacy kept growing over time. How Jeremiah Johnson became a classic. The stripped-down feeling of Jeremiah Johnson did not stop with the visuals. The music nearly changed too. Tim McIntyre and John Rubinstein created a sparse, folk-like score instead of the big, sweeping Western sound the studio expected. Warner wanted something fuller and more dramatic, but Sidney Pollock fought to keep the quieter version because he felt it matched the lonely mood of the mountains. Test screenings compared the two, and audiences preferred the original score, so it stayed. That choice mattered because the film's main melody later became one of its most memorable features. Even a song tied to the film almost did not make it in, which shows how much of the movie was questioned during production. When the film first came out, it was respected, but it was not treated like a major phenomenon right away. Over time, though, that changed. Through late-night television, college screenings, and word of mouth, Jeremiah Johnson slowly built a stronger following. Its quiet style, isolation, and rejection of modern life connected with many viewers, especially younger audiences of that era. What had once seemed modest slowly became lasting. The film also made history early on. It premiered at the 1972 Cannes Film Festival and became the first Western ever accepted there. It later received positive reviews and earned strong money over time. Years after its release, the legend behind the story was still being shaped. In 1974, after a campaign by 25 seventh-grade students and their teacher, the remains of liver-eating Johnson were moved to Cody, Wyoming. His epitaph read, "No more trails." In the end, Jeremiah Johnson did more than survive its difficult making. It stayed alive through its music, its reputation, and the legend that kept growing long after the film was over. Do you think Jeremiah Johnson became more powerful because it left some of its darker story outside the film? And if that deleted scene had stayed in, do you think it would have made the film better or taken away from what made it special? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.